Descent of the Demon God. By Hanjo Wiolia. Chapter 232. Epilogue. Part 1.
Munku was a descendant of the demon dragon Palm clan of the Sky Demon Order. She is the only woman in Chun Yoan's heart. The story of how they met rivals the tale of the butterfly lovers.
In a cave with many talismans attached to it, someone was looking through the gap of the whip wrapped around her face. She stared endlessly at the thick entrance, covered with a barrier. How long does she have to be locked up? Does she have to be in pain forever? Despite having so many questions, no one could answer her. The wounds on her heart that had lost the only refuge she had couldn't be forgotten even after 1,000 years. Instead, death seemed like the only way out. She looked at the door, which looked like it would never open. Shap. The cape with amulets opened. The door? Her eyes sharpened when she saw the stone wall crack. Who is it? Is it the descendant of the ancestor who imprisoned her? She didn't know what it was, but hoped to be able to get out of that damned barrier. Thud. Someone walked in through that cracked door. She could see the person who came in with slow steps. Is he a descendant of that sage? The young man had very fair skin and sharp eyes. He looked different from that old man. Instead, he seemed closer to the dark side than the good side. Dangerous. She felt a strong ominous feeling coming from him. It was the first time she felt such intimidation since ancient times. Even the man who was her safe haven wasn't like this. Shoo. Then, the dangerous-looking man reached out. Weak. All the talismans were burned and flew all around the place. The whip that was binding her was also released. He is very powerful. She pondered for a moment. Should I attack? However, she wasn't competent enough to fight as she wasn't fully recovered. Then, should she seduce him so he'd let her go? Eventually, she made up her mind. Whoa! Her body shrank with a golden light. Turning into a beautiful naked woman, she approached the man to try and seduce him. How did you get here? It doesn't matter. Huh? The man smiled and put his hand on her forehead. Huh? Whoa. She was startled as the massive yokai energy entered her body, but she didn't shake it off as it felt very familiar. This was her energy. As soon as the energy wrapped around her body, numerous illusions spread into her mind. This? The image of the man in front of her was going through her mind. It felt vaguely familiar for their first meeting. Chun Ma, even if you tell me not to, I will come. Sure. You are so like him. Even if it isn't me, you will find a shelter. It means nothing without you. Her hesitating and then the slight kiss on the lips engulfed her mind. And speaking softly. Think of that as me. The sadness rushed after that. The man smiling in front of her acted like he was okay with her crossing the line. She felt pain in her heart. Shoo. The yokai energy that came from the man ultimately settled in her body. She staggered and raised her head. She hugged him as she burst into tears. Chun Ma. This man was Chun Yoan, the second haven she was longing for. And that haven came for her. Chun Yoan, who looked at her, shook his head. I knew this would happen. He was someone who didn't know that yokai energy could contain memories. The Gumiho smiled broadly at Chun Yoan, making her look more beautiful. I knew you would come back. She found her light in the endless darkness and was the happiest woman in the world. Chapter 233. Epilogue. Part 2. After many years had passed, the Sky Demon Order was still standing in the midst of waves and winds. Shoo! The sound of the last page turning was heard. What happened on the 3 days of his disappearance is an incident not recorded in the history of Chun Yoan, the 24th Lord of Sky Demon Order, who unified the Murim for the first time. Then, water dropped on the book the boy was holding. Drip. Ah. The boy in robes was startled and wiped the tears from the book with his sleeve. He was worried that the paper would get torn as he wiped, so he checked. And fortunately, the book was okay. Then he mumbled in disbelief. Why the hell is this book here? The boy looked around. This was a story room on the last floor of the Sky Demon Order's records hall. The boy who discovered this book felt tranced and read it until night. Why didn't Grandpa never tell me of this? This was something he had never heard of. He was a boy who often stopped by the hall with his great-grandfather, who recently passed away. Future? Vehicles? I cannot imagine. As he read the text, he wondered if such a world existed. Would anyone believe it? Despite reading it all, the first thing he thought was, "No can know the truth." It felt strange thinking about it. Had such a thing been there, it would have been an uproar. It seemed like a nonsensical story. However, reading this made him want to see his great-grandfather. Grandpa. Who would have known that a man who reached immortality had passed? Yet, none of the members of the Sky Demon Order could accept the fact. Shoo! The boy who looked at the book thought. Shall I take it? It was against the rules, but leaving a book about his great-grandfather here would be a waste. While he was contemplating it, someone came to him. Young Master Chen. Ah. Startled at the woman's voice, the boy hid the book behind him. Looking back, he saw a beautiful woman standing there. The woman sighed with a frown. Do you think I cannot see it because you are hiding it from my eyes? But. The books can only be read here. Aren't you familiar with the rule? In the past, people would memorize everything and leave the books. The boy was shocked at her and showed her the book he was hiding. When he handed it, it was evident that he felt bad. Young Master Chen. Just then, someone waiting outside showed up. Wearing a mask with a unique pattern, it was the Great Guardian, Mara Sung. Great Guardian? The Lord is looking for you. Ah. He was going to ask if it was fine to keep the book with him just for a little while, but now that the Great Guardian was here, he couldn't do that. The woman smiled and said, I need to work. Young Master Chen, please go meet the Lord. Fine. He was sad he couldn't keep it. He couldn't take it, but he knew where this book would be. I will come again. Sure. As his steps turned lighter, he felt like he alone knew the secrets of his great-grandfather. But he noticed something strange. Was there a woman working on the last floor of the record hall? He didn't see one before. Thud. And at that time, the door was closed shut. The boy, who was contemplating, eventually followed the Great Guardian down the stairs. Tack. Then there was a sound of something being scratched at the stone of sapphire located in the middle of the hall, which was tightly shut. Someone was standing there with one hand behind his back and the other hand engraving something on the stone. The sapphire stone, which should have been difficult to cut, had something written on it by hand. It was strange that neither the boy nor the Great Guardian, who visited the place, didn't seem to notice the existence of this person. The woman, who sent the boy away, approached him from behind. The beautiful woman held on to the book, then a fire flared out from her hand, burning it. Weak. The treasure the boy would come to find again was now just ashes. I am deeply moved at the thought of that grandchild, Chun Ma. As she took a step ahead, her tied black hair was untied and turned golden. In addition, her eyes were also now gold. She was none other than the Golden Gumiho. Tuk tuk. The person who was inscribing something on the sapphire stone lifted his hand. And, of course, that person was Chen Yuan. The Golden Gumiho approached him with a smile and said. He said he wasn't going to tell that to anyone. I wanted someone to remember that. At that, Chen Yuan leaned back and said. Because that is what truly lives forever. At Chen Yowen's words, the golden Gumiho stayed silent and then said with a smile. As expected, you are so similar. You have been saying that for 100 years. Huh. And I plan to do it always. Chen Yowen shook his head. Her body shined in gold as she turned into a baby fox. Then she went up onto Chen Yowen's shoulder. You are officially dead. Where will we go now? At her question, Chen Yowen grinned as he answered. Beyond the border? Beyond the border? He is waiting there. At those words, Gumiho's eyes widened cutely. Either way, when Chen Yowen waved his hands, the scattered sapphire particles vanished, and so did they. A whispering voice came out from her as they were disappearing from there. Chen Ma, is your ancestor there? Why? Do you want to go there now? Oh my! What am I to do? 2 men will fight for me. Hee hee. I was waiting for 100 years to let you go. So mean. Then the 2 people in the hall vanished, leaving the place in silence.